I switched plates with my daughter-in-law at Thanksgiving. It saved my life. That's what they don't tell you about being 73 years old and alone in your own house with your family sitting around the dining room table you polished that morning until your hands ached. They don't tell you that the people you raised, the ones who used to crawl into your lap when they had nightmares, might one day look at you and see nothing but money and property and a signature on documents you barely understood when you signed them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with the gravy. My son Daniel made it himself that year, which should have been my first warning because Daniel had never made gravy in his entire 48 years of life. His wife Bethany handled all the cooking at their house the same way I had always handled it at mine when Robert was alive. Daniel showed up that Thanksgiving morning with the gravy in a ceramic boat I'd given them as a wedding gift 14 years ago, back when I still thought Bethany might turn out to be the daughter I never had, instead of the woman who looked through me like I was a smudge on her designer sunglasses. The gravy boat was cream-coloured with delicate blue flowers painted around the rim, the kind of thing you could find at any estate sale in our neighbourhood, the kind of thing that said grandmother without having to say anything at all. Daniel set it on my dining room table with both hands, careful, like he was carrying something precious. "Made this special for you, Mom," he said. His smile was too wide, too practiced. The same smile he'd used when he was 16 and had wrecked my car, but hadn't told me yet. I should have known then. But you get old and you get tired and you start to think maybe you're being paranoid. Maybe you're just lonely. Maybe you're imagining the way your own son looks at you, like you're an obstacle instead of a person. You tell yourself that families are complicated, that adult children have their own lives, that you should be grateful they came for Thanksgiving at all, instead of going to Bethany's mother's house in Connecticut. Like they'd threatened to do last year when I wouldn't co-sign their loan for the beach house. I'd been cooking since 6 that morning, turkey, stuffing, 3 kinds of potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce from scratch, the way Robert had always liked it, even though Robert had been dead for 8 years and nobody else at that table gave a damn whether the cranberries were fresh or canned. My feet hurt. My back hurt. The arthritis in my hands had turned from a dull ache to sharp, bright pain somewhere around the time I was rolling out pie crust. But I'd kept going because that's what you do. That's what I'd always done. Daniel and Bethany had arrived at 2 in the afternoon, exactly when I'd asked them to come. My granddaughter Lily had come with them, thank God, the only one at that table who still looked at me like I was a person instead of a service or a checkbook. 22 years old, studying business law at the State University. Her grandmother's spine and her grandfather's quiet way of watching everything before she spoke. She'd helped me carry serving dishes to the table while Daniel poured himself whiskey in my living room, and Bethany inspected my china cabinet like she was cataloguing which pieces she'd keep when I was gone. "You okay, Grandma?" Lily had asked me while we were alone in the kitchen. Her hand on my arm was gentle, worried. "Just tired, sweetheart. You do too much for them. They're my family. Family's supposed to take care of each other," she'd said quietly, and something in her voice made me look at her more carefully. But then Daniel had called from the dining room that everything was getting cold and the moment had passed. We sat down at the table I'd set with my mother's tablecloth, the white linen one with the hand-embroidered edges that I'd spent 45 years being careful not to stain. The turkey sat at one end, golden and perfect, exactly the way Norman Rockwell would have painted it. Daniel sat at the other end in Robert's chair, the leather wingback that still smelt faintly of Robert's cologne if you got close enough, the chair I'd stopped sitting in because it hurt too much to feel that empty space beside me. No one had asked if they could sit there. Daniel had just taken it, the same way he'd taken my spare bedroom to store his golf clubs last summer, the same way Bethany had taken my mother's pearl necklace for safekeeping 3 Christmases ago, and I'd never seen it again. We said grace. I don't remember what I said. Something about being grateful, probably. Something about family and blessings and another year together. All the words you're supposed to say even when you don't mean them anymore. Even when you're sitting at your own table, feeling like a stranger in your own house. And then Daniel picked up the gravy boat. "Mum," he said, leaning forward with that too bright smile, "you have to try this. I worked on this recipe all week." He poured it over my turkey, over my mashed potatoes, pooling in the small well I'd made in the centre of the potatoes, the way I'd done since I was a little girl, watching my own mother do the same thing. The gravy was thick and brown and smelled like mushrooms and wine, and something else I couldn't quite place, something slightly metallic that made my stomach turn, even though I couldn't say why. "I insist," Daniel said when I hesitated. "It's really not necessary, Mum." His voice had an edge to it now, the same edge I'd heard 6 months ago when I'd questioned why he needed me to sign something his lawyer had drawn up, something about power of attorney that he'd said was just a formality, just in case. "I made this for you. The least you can do is try it." Bethany was watching me with her pale blue eyes, perfectly still, perfectly expressionless. Lily's hand had gone tight around her fork, and something in me, some animal instinct that had nothing to do with paranoia or loneliness or being a foolish old woman, said, "No." Not out loud, I didn't say it out loud, but I thought it so clearly that it felt like the word had weight, like it had substance, like it was the first solid thing I'd held in 8 years of being diminished and reduced and made invisible in my own life. "No." "Actually," I said, keeping my voice light and pleasant and grandmotherly. The voice I'd perfected over 7 decades of smoothing over conflicts and keeping peace and making sure everyone else was comfortable, even when I was screaming inside, "Bethany, you should try it first. Daniel's so proud of it." I switched our plates while I was talking, smooth and casual, like I was just being polite, just being a good hostess. My plate, with its generous helping of gravy, went in front of Bethany. Her plate, still clean, no gravy at all, came to rest in front of me. "I'm sure it's wonderful, sweetheart," I said to Daniel, "but you know how my stomach's been lately." It was a lie. My stomach was fine, but old women are allowed to have digestive issues, allowed to be fussy about their food, allowed to be grateful for small mercies and careful about upsetting their delicate constitutions. Daniel's face went very still, then very red, but Bethany had already taken a bite. 15 minutes later, Bethany was on my bathroom floor, vomiting so violently that I could hear it from the kitchen, where I was wrapping the leftover turkey in aluminum foil with hands that wouldn't quite stop shaking. Daniel had carried her there after she'd made it 3 bites into her turkey. After her face had gone grey and then green, and then she'd stood up so fast her chair fell backward and cracked against my hardwood floor, leaving a gouge I can still see when the light hits it right. He'd run after her, his footsteps heavy on my stairs. The stairs I'd climbed 10,000 times, carrying laundry and groceries and all the invisible weight of keeping a household running for people who'd stopped noticing I was doing it. Lily had called 911. I had stayed in the dining room, very still, looking at Bethany's plate with its half-eaten turkey swimming in Daniel's special gravy. The gravy boat sat in the centre of the table, cream-coloured with those delicate blue flowers, completely innocent if you didn't know what it had been meant to do, what it had been meant to do to me. The paramedics arrived 12 minutes after Lily's call, which I know because I watched the clock above my fireplace. The one Robert had bought at an antique store in Vermont on our 30th anniversary, and counted every second while my son held his wife's hair back in my bathroom and murmured soothing lies about food poisoning and bad oysters, even though there were no oysters, had never been oysters, and we both knew it. They took Bethany out on a stretcher. Her face was the colour of old newspaper, her perfect makeup streaked and ruined, her designer dress stained. She was crying, not from pain, I thought, but from fear, the kind of fear that comes when you realise you've been caught in something you can't explain away. Daniel went with her in the ambulance, of course. He had to. Devoted husband, concerned son. He kissed my cheek at the door, but his eyes were somewhere else, calculating, already building the story he'd tell at the hospital. Food poisoning, bad turkey. His elderly mother's cooking, you know how it is. She's getting older. Maybe shouldn't be trusted with Thanksgiving anymore. "I'll call you from the hospital," he said. He never did. Lily and I stood in my doorway and watched the ambulance pull away, red lights painting my quiet street in pulses of emergency, the neighbours probably looking out their windows and shaking their heads about poor Daniel's wife. About poor Daniel with his difficult mother, who'd probably made everyone sick with her outdated cooking methods and her refusal to admit she was too old to handle a holiday dinner. The door closed. The silence was immediate and total, and had weight. The kind of weight that presses on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I could feel it settling into my house, into my bones, into all the spaces that had been filled with noise and movement and the pretense of family just minutes before. "Grandma," Lily said quietly. "I need to save the gravy," I said. I walked back to my dining room on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. My hands were steady now, very steady, steadier than they'd been in months. I picked up the gravy boat, careful not to spill a drop, and carried it to my kitchen. Found a glass container with a tight sealing lid. Poured the gravy in, watching it slide thick and brown and poisonous from the ceramic spout. Sealed it, labelled it with today's date and the word evidence in my careful handwriting. The handwriting I'd used to write grocery lists and birthday cards and thank you notes for gifts I didn't want from people who didn't care. Put it in the back of my refrigerator, behind the milk and the butter, and the leftover cranberry sauce that nobody had touched because nobody cared whether I'd spent an hour making it from scratch. Lily was standing in the kitchen doorway watching me. "Grandma," she said again, and there was something in her voice that made me turn around. "I need to tell you something." She looked like she might cry, like she might break. 22 years old and everything ahead of her, and she was looking at me like I was the one who needed protection, like I was the one who was fragile. "It's all right, sweetheart. It's not." Her voice cracked. "I saw him." I waited. "This morning, before you woke up, Dad came early. I was in the upstairs hallway and he didn't see me. He went into the kitchen and he had this little bottle, like a dropper bottle, the kind you'd use for medicine or essential oils or something. He took it out of his pocket and he—" She stopped, swallowed, started again. "He added something to the gravy from the bottle, just a few drops. He stirred it in with a spoon, then he washed the spoon and put it back in your drawer like nothing happened. I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe it was some kind of flavouring, some special ingredient. I didn't think, oh honey, I should have said something. I should have—" "You didn't know," I said. And I was surprised by how steady my voice was, how calm, like I was comforting a child who'd scraped her knee, not a young woman who'd just watched her father try to poison her grandmother. "How could you have known?" "I knew Dad's been weird lately, asking about your will, about your finances. Mum said he's been stressed about money, that the beach house was more expensive than they thought, that the business isn't doing as well as he claimed." But I didn't think. She was crying now, silent tears running down her face, the way I'd cried alone in my bedroom for 8 years. The crying you do when you don't want anyone to hear you, when you've learned that showing pain just makes you vulnerable. I pulled her into my arms, this girl who was taller than me now, who smelled like the vanilla perfume I'd given her for Christmas last year, and I held her while she shook. "Listen to me," I said into her hair. "This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. Do you understand?" She nodded against my shoulder. I need you to write down everything you saw, every detail. What time it was, what the bottle looked like, what he did. Can you do that? Yes. And I need you to not tell your father that you told me. Can you do that too? She pulled back, looked at me with her grandmother's eyes in her young face. What are you going to do? I looked at my kitchen, at the refrigerator humming quietly in the corner, with its evidence carefully stored. At the dining room, beyond where my mother's tablecloth would need to be washed and my floor would need to be refinished, where Bethany's chair had gouged it. At the life I'd built in this house over 50 years of marriage and 8 years of widowhood, the life my son had decided was worth less than whatever money he could take. From my bank accounts and whatever property he could sell after I was gone, I'm going to protect myself, I said. The words felt strange in my mouth, foreign, like something another person would say, someone strong and certain and not diminished by decades of putting everyone else first. But I said them anyway. I meant them anyway. That night, after Lily had gone home, with promises to write everything down and to call me tomorrow and to be careful, so careful, I sat in Robert's chair for the first time in 8 years. The leather was cool against my back, still holding the shape of him, still smelling faintly of that woodsy cologne he'd worn every day of our marriage. The house was quiet, my house, my name on the deed, my furniture, my memories, my life that I'd somehow let Daniel and Bethany convince me wasn't entirely mine anymore, that I needed their help to manage, that I was too old to handle on my own. I was 73 years old. I'd raised 2 children, buried one in infancy, nursed my husband through cancer, managed our household finances for 40 years while Robert ran his business, kept a garden, volunteered at the library, survived pneumonia and a car accident, and the kind of loneliness that comes when everyone you've loved is gone and the people left don't see you anymore. I was not too old to handle my own life. I was not too old to fight back. I was not too fragile to survive this. And I was done, completely done, being invisible. The documents were in my desk drawer, filed neatly in a manila folder labelled Legal Daniel, in his handwriting, not mine. I found them at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep, when the house was dark and silent, except for the settling sounds old houses make, the creaks and whispers that had kept me company for 8 years of sleeping alone. I'd been looking for my original will, the one Robert and I had drawn up together 30 years ago, with a lawyer in town who'd since retired. The one that split everything evenly between Daniel and the daughter we'd lost, whose share would have gone to any grandchildren. I wanted to see it, wanted to remember what I'd intended before everything got complicated, before Daniel had started coming by with papers to sign and explanations that sounded reasonable at the time, but felt wrong now, in the harsh light of attempted murder. What I found instead was a power of attorney dated 6 months ago. Durable power of attorney for financial management, the header read. Principal, Margaret Elizabeth Hayes. Attorney in fact, Daniel Robert Hayes. My signature was at the bottom in my careful handwriting. I didn't remember signing it, no. That wasn't true. I remembered Daniel had come by on a Tuesday afternoon with his lawyer. A young man in an expensive suit who'd called me Mrs. Hayes and smiled with too many teeth. They'd spread papers across my dining room table, the same table where Daniel had tried to poison me 6 months later, and explained that this was just a formality, just a way to make sure my bills could be paid if I ever got sick. If I ever needed help, nothing to worry about at my age. Just in case, Daniel had said, using that voice adults use with children when they want them to do something without asking too many questions. You don't want to end up like Margaret Thompson down the street, remember? Fell, broke her hip, couldn't pay her bills for 3 months because she couldn't get to the bank. This way I can help you if you need it. I'd signed it. God help me, I'd signed it because I was tired and lonely, and it was easier to trust my son than to admit that I didn't entirely understand what I was signing, that the lawyer's explanation had been too fast and too full of legal words that blurred together, that I'd been taught my whole life that good mothers trust their children and good women don't make a fuss. But I understood it now. I understood it perfectly as I sat at my desk at 2 a.m, reading through 6 pages of dense legal language. That basically said Daniel could access my bank accounts, sell my property, make financial decisions on my behalf, take out loans in my name, and I would have no say in any of it unless I could prove I was mentally competent to revoke it. Mentally competent. That was the phrase that made my hands start shaking again. It made my chest tight, made it hard to breathe, because I knew what Daniel would say if I tried to revoke this. I knew what story he'd already been building, layer by layer, visit by visit, every time he'd asked me in front of witnesses if I'd remembered to take my pills, if I'd forgotten our lunch date again. If I was feeling confused lately, building a narrative of a woman losing her grip, losing her memory, losing her ability to manage her own life, setting the stage for exactly this moment, I kept reading. Behind the power of attorney was a life insurance policy I didn't remember buying, with Daniel listed as the sole beneficiary, Monsieur Ponce. $500,000 payable upon my death. The premiums were being paid from my checking account automatically, $180 a month for the past 6 months that I'd never questioned because I'd stopped looking at my statements the way I used to, had started trusting that Daniel was helping me manage things. Behind that was a deed transfer document, not signed yet, but filled out completely, ready to transfer my house from my name to a family trust that listed Daniel as the trustee and primary beneficiary. Behind that was a copy of my old will with notes in Daniel's handwriting in the margin. Outdated, needs revision, remove charitable bequests, simplify distribution. Simplify distribution meant leave everything to him. I sat at my desk until the sun came up, reading through document after document, seeing the careful architecture of what my son had been building. Not quickly, not sloppily, but methodically, legally, using my trust and my loneliness and my fear of being difficult against me. The gravy hadn't been a sudden impulse. It had been the next step in a plan that started months ago, maybe years ago, maybe the moment Robert died and Daniel realized that all of this, the house, the savings, the life insurance, the retirement accounts, would eventually be his if he could just wait for nature to take its course, or accelerate it. My stomach turned, but I didn't cry. I was done crying. Crying was what I'd done for 8 years, while Daniel slowly convinced me I was less capable, less competent, less worthy of autonomy. Crying was what I'd done alone in my bedroom while Bethany took my mother's pearls and Daniel moved his golf clubs into my spare room. And both of them helped themselves to my kitchen and my time and my life without asking, without thanking, without seeing me as anything more than a resource to be managed and eventually depleted. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to act. At 8 in the morning, I called my lawyer. Not Daniel's lawyer, but mine, the one Robert and I had used before he died. Gerald Morrison, who'd been practicing law in this town for 40 years, who'd drawn up our wills and handled Robert's estate, and had sent me a sympathy card every year on the anniversary of Robert's death with a handwritten note that said, "Thinking of you." His secretary tried to tell me he was booked for the next 2 weeks. "This is Margaret Hayes," I said in a voice I didn't entirely recognize, steady and cold and allowing no argument. "Robert Hayes's widow. I need to see Gerald today. It's urgent." "It's regarding my son attempting to take legal control of my assets under false pretenses. And I need to revoke documents I signed under duress." I was put through to Gerald in 30 seconds. He saw me at 10. I spent the 2 hours between the phone call and the appointment getting dressed in my best suit, the navy one I'd bought for Robert's funeral and hadn't worn since, and gathering every document from that manila folder in my desk drawer. I made copies at the library 3 blocks from my house, walking there in the November cold with my breath fogging in front of me and my hands steady on the papers. Mrs. Chen at the library circulation desk asked if I was all right. "I'm fine," I said, and I was surprised to find it wasn't entirely a lie. I wasn't all right, exactly. My son had tried to kill me. My daughter-in-law had been a willing accomplice. The family I'd thought I had was a fiction. The life I'd been living was built on the foundation of my own diminishment. But I was taking it back one step at a time, one document at a time, one quiet, deliberate act of refusal at a time. Gerald's office was in the same building it had been in for 40 years, above the bank on Main Street, with the same worn carpet and the same smell of old leather and paper and coffee. He stood when I came in, came around his desk to shake my hand, and I saw in his eyes that he knew something was seriously wrong. "Margaret," he said gently. I handed him the folder. "I need you to tell me how bad this is," I said. "And then I need you to tell me how to fix it." He read for 20 minutes while I sat in the leather chair across from his desk and watched the street below. The normal people doing normal things, buying coffee and walking dogs and living lives that didn't include their children trying to poison them for their money. When he looked up, his face was grim. "Margaret," he said carefully, "this power of attorney is extremely broad. It gives Daniel almost complete control over your finances. The good news is that you're clearly mentally competent, so we can revoke it. But we need to do it immediately, formally, and we need to be prepared for him to contest it." How would he contest it? By claiming you're not competent to revoke it. By claiming you're being unduly influenced by someone, possibly me, to make decisions against your own best interests. By starting a competency hearing or trying to get a guardian appointed. A guardian, yes. The word hung in the air between us like something toxic. A guardian. Someone appointed by the court to make decisions for me because I'd been deemed incapable of making them for myself. Someone who would control my money, my property, my life. Someone who would probably be Daniel. "That's not going to happen," I said. "No," Gerald agreed, "it's not. But we need to move quickly, and we need to be strategic." He pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "First, we revoke the power of attorney today. I'll prepare the document, you'll sign it, and we'll file it with the county clerk and send certified copies to every bank and institution where you have accounts. Second, we're going to change your will. Third, we're going to establish a trust. An irrevocable trust that removes these assets from your personal estate so that even if Daniel somehow got control of your finances, he couldn't touch what's in the trust. You'd name a trustee, someone you trust absolutely, and a beneficiary." I thought of Lily at my kitchen table, writing down everything she'd seen, her hands shaking but her handwriting steady. "My granddaughter," I said. "Lily." Gerald nodded. "We can do that. She's over 18, legally an adult, if you trust her." "I do." "Then let's get started." The revocation of power of attorney took 15 minutes to sign and notarize. Gerald's paralegal, a woman named Susan, who'd worked for him since before Robert died, served as witness along with the notary from the office next door. 3 signatures, 1 stamp, and Daniel's carefully constructed legal control over my life was gone. "I'm filing this with the county clerk today," Gerald said, putting the document in a protective sleeve. "I'll send certified copies to every institution where you have accounts." "But Margaret, you need to go to the bank today, right now. before Daniel knows this has been revoked. What do I need to do? Check your accounts, all of them. Look for any unauthorized transfers or withdrawals. If you find anything, document it immediately and file a police report. This isn't just about revoking the power of attorney. If he's already taken money, that's theft. That's criminal. My hands went cold. You think he's already taken money? I think, Gerald said carefully, that someone who went to this much trouble to get legal access to your finances probably didn't wait to use it. And I think someone who was willing to poison you wasn't planning to wait for you to die naturally. He was right. First National Bank was 4 blocks from Gerald's office, a brick building that had been there since before I was born, where I'd opened my first checking account with Robert in 1968. The manager was Tom Preston, who'd started as a teller the year Robert died and had worked his way up. He'd sent a sympathy card when Robert passed. He remembered my name. Mrs. Hayes, he said when his secretary brought me into his office, what can I do for you? I handed him the letter Gerald had prepared, the one explaining that the power of attorney previously on file had been revoked and that I required a complete audit of all my accounts for the past 6 months, including any transactions authorized under that power of attorney. Tom read it twice. I'll need to pull the records, he said. This might take a few minutes. It took 20 minutes. When he came back, his face was pale. Mrs. Hayes, he said quietly, I think we need to talk. The total was $68,000. $68,000 transferred from my savings account to an account in Daniel's name over the course of 4 months. Not all at once, that would have been too obvious, but in increments, 5,000 here, 8,000 there, 12,000 that time, always just under the amount that would trigger automatic reporting to the IRS. These were all authorized under the power of attorney on file, Tom said. And I could hear in his voice that he was already worried about liability, about whether the bank would be blamed for allowing this. We had no reason to question them. The documentation was all in order. I understand, I said, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded. I'm not blaming the bank. I'm blaming my son. Mrs. Hayes, I need several things from you, Tom. I need a complete record of these transactions. I need all of Daniel's access to my accounts terminated immediately. I need new account numbers, new cards, new everything. And I need a letter on bank stationery documenting this theft. I can do all of that, he said, but Mrs. Hayes, if you're planning to pursue this criminally, you should know that it's my son, I finished for him. Yes, I know. It's going to be complicated. Everything is complicated, I said, but it's also straightforward. He stole from me. He tried to kill me. And I'm not going to let him get away with either one because he's my son. Tom nodded slowly. I'll get you those records. I waited in his office while he worked, sitting in a leather chair that was probably worth more than the first car Robert and I had bought together, looking out the window at the normal people living their normal lives. A young mother with a stroller, an elderly man with a newspaper, a teenager on a skateboard. None of them had just discovered their son had stolen $68,000 from them. None of them were 73 years old and fighting to keep control of the life they'd built. None of them were as alone as I was, but none of them were as determined either. Tom came back with a folder full of records, transaction histories, transfer authorizations, all of it with Daniel's signature on the authorization forms, all of it perfectly legal under the power of attorney I'd signed 6 months ago. In my dining room, while Daniel smiled and his lawyer showed too many teeth, "I've closed the old accounts and opened new ones," Tom said. "Here are your new account numbers and temporary cards. The permanent ones will be mailed to your home address within 7 business days. Thank you." "Mrs. Hayes, I'm sorry. If I'd known you couldn't have known," I said. That was the point. I left the bank with the folder under my arm, walking slowly down Main Street in the November afternoon with my new account numbers in my purse and the weight of $68,000 of theft pressing on my chest like something physical. He'd stolen from me. Not just tried to kill me, not just manipulated me into signing away my autonomy, but actively, deliberately stolen money from accounts I'd built with Robert over 40 years of marriage, money we'd saved for retirement and emergencies, and maybe leaving something for our children and grandchildren. Money Daniel had taken the way you'd take something from someone who didn't exist anymore, who didn't matter, who was already gone. I stopped at the police station on my way home. The officer at the front desk was young, maybe 25, with kind eyes and a wedding ring. He listened to my story without interrupting, and I watched his expression change from polite attention to disbelief to something darker. "Ma'am," he said when I finished, "are you saying your son attempted to poison you and has stolen $68,000 from your bank accounts?" "Yes." "And you have evidence?" I set the bank folder on his desk, set Gerald's revocation of power of attorney beside it, set the jar of gravy which I'd brought from my refrigerator, still labelled evidence in my careful handwriting, next to both. My granddaughter witnessed him adding something to food that later made his wife seriously ill when she ate it instead of me. The bank has records of unauthorized transfers. My lawyer has copies of legal documents signed under false pretenses. I need to file a formal complaint. The young officer stared at the gravy jar. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to get my supervisor." The supervisor was a woman in her 50s, Detective Sarah Chen, who had the same tired eyes I saw in my mirror every morning. She took me into a small room with a metal table and a recorder, and asked me to tell the story again from the beginning. I did. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in neat handwriting that reminded me of Lily's. "Mrs. Hayes," she said when I finished, "I want you to understand that cases like this are difficult. Elder abuse, especially financial elder abuse by family members, is hard to prosecute. Your son will claim you're confused, that the money was for legitimate expenses, that you're being manipulated by someone who wants to turn you against your family. I know. He'll make you look incompetent. He'll try, I said, but I'm not. No, Detective Chen agreed, looking at the neat folder of documents I'd brought, at the labelled jar of evidence. At my calm face and steady hands, you're clearly not. What do I need to do? I'll start an investigation. We'll need to test the gravy, interview your granddaughter, request medical records from the hospital where your daughter-in-law was treated. It's going to take time. I have time, I said. I'm 73, I'm retired. I have nothing but time and the desire to make sure my son doesn't inherit a penny from me and possibly goes to prison for what he tried to do. Something flickered in Detective Chen's eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. The look of one woman who'd been underestimated, seeing another woman who was done accepting it. We'll do everything we can, she said. I left the police station at 4 in the afternoon. The sun was already setting, the November sky turning that particular shade of grey that meant winter was coming, that meant long dark months ahead, that meant cold. But I wasn't cold. I was burning. Lily came to my house 3 days later with a phone in her hand and a look on her face that I recognised, because I'd seen it in the mirror every morning since Thanksgiving. The look of someone who'd learned that the people they loved were capable of things they'd never imagined. "Grandma," she said at my door, "I have something you need to hear." We sat in my living room, in the chairs Robert and I had bought 30 years ago. When we'd redecorated after the kids moved out, Lily set her phone on the coffee table between us, her hands shaking slightly as she pulled up a recording. "I went to dinner at their house last night," she said quietly. "Dad asked me to come. Said Mum was feeling better and they wanted to talk to me. I knew something was wrong, so I recorded everything on my phone." She pressed play. Daniel's voice filled my living room, tinny but clear. "Needs to be declared incompetent. That's the only way to overturn what she's done. Gerald Morrison is a senile old fool, and Mum's clearly not thinking straight." The gravy was supposed to be gentle, just enough to make her sick, to show she needed help. Bethany wasn't supposed to eat it. Bethany's voice, weaker than usual, still recovering. "I still don't understand why you didn't just wait. She's 73. How much longer could she have?" "Because waiting means her bleeding heart could give everything away. Do you know how much she donates every year? 20,000 to the library, 15 to the animal shelter, 10 to that ridiculous women's shelter downtown. That's our inheritance she's pissing away on strangers." So what do we do now? We prove she's incompetent. Get her declared mentally unfit. There are doctors who specialise in this kind of evaluation. We get the right doctor and we get a guardian appointed, probably me. Then we can undo all this damage she's done, fire Gerald Morrison, restructure her assets the way they should be. And if she fights it... A pause. Then Daniel's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. "She's an old woman who almost poisoned her daughter-in-law with bad cooking. Who's going to believe her over us?" Lily stopped the recording. The silence in my living room had weight and texture and mass. I could feel it pressing against my skin, could feel it filling my lungs, could feel it settling into every corner of the house I'd lived in for 50 years. "I'm sorry," Lily whispered. "I'm so sorry, Grandma." "Don't be sorry," I said, and my voice was steady, so steady. "You just gave me exactly what I need." I called Detective Chen from my landline while Lily sat beside me, both of us listening to the phone ring 3 times before she picked up. "Detective Chen, this is Margaret Hayes. My granddaughter has a recording of my son and daughter-in-law discussing the poisoning attempt and their plans to have me declared incompetent to regain control of my assets. I need to know how quickly you can file formal charges." There was a brief pause. Then, "How quickly can you get to my office?" We were there in 20 minutes. Detective Chen listened to the recording twice, her expression neutral and professional, but I saw her hands tighten on her desk when Daniel said the gravy was supposed to be gentle. "Mrs. Hayes," she said when the recording finished, "with this evidence and the lab results from the gravy sample we tested, which came back positive for oleander extract, by the way, a known poison, I have enough to file charges: attempted murder, theft, elder abuse, conspiracy. I'll need your granddaughter's formal statement and permission to use this recording as evidence." "You have both," Lily said immediately. "Then I'll have the warrant request on the prosecutor's desk by end of business today." I sat in Detective Chen's office and felt something shift inside me, something fundamental and irreversible. The fear that had lived in my chest for 8 years, the fear of being difficult or demanding or ungrateful, the fear of being alone, the fear of being too much or not enough or simply invisible. It cracked, it splintered. It fell away like old plaster from a wall, revealing something solid underneath. I was not afraid anymore. I was done being afraid. "Thank you," I said to Detective Chen. "Thank you," she replied, "for not being too scared to fight back. You'd be surprised how many people in your situation just accept it." "I'm not accepting anything anymore," I said. The trust was finalized the following week. Gerald's office, same worn carpet, same coffee smell, but this time with Lily sitting beside me. As we signed the documents that made her the trustee and sole beneficiary of an irrevocable trust containing my house, my savings, my retirement accounts, everything I had built and saved and earned over 7 decades of life. "This can't be undone," Gerald explained to both of us. "Once these assets are in the trust, Margaret, you can't take them back out. Lily will have legal control as trustee, with the assets distributed to her upon your death. It protects everything from creditors, legal judgments, and anyone who might try to claim guardianship over you." That's the point, I said. I signed my name on the final page, my handwriting as careful and deliberate as it had been on the revocation of power of attorney, as careful as it had been on 60 years of grocery lists and birthday cards and all the invisible documentation of a life lived in service to others. But this was different. This was service to myself. My will was updated the same day. Everything not in the trust, my personal belongings, my books, my mother's china, the few pieces of jewellery Bethany hadn't taken, all of it going to Lily. Daniel's name appeared exactly once in a clause that specifically stated he was being disinherited and would receive nothing, not through oversight but through deliberate choice. In case he tries to contest it, Gerald explained, this makes it clear you intended to leave him nothing. Good, I said. That night I sat in Robert's chair again and felt its familiar comfort. Felt the way the leather had shaped itself to me over the past few weeks as I'd reclaimed it from being a memorial to being simply a chair, simply mine. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the heavy silence of loneliness, but something lighter, something chosen, peace. Not the peace of having everything resolved, because Daniel and Bethany were still out there, still plotting, still convinced they could overturn what I'd done. Not the peace of having my family back, because that family had never really existed, had been a fiction I'd told myself to avoid the truth of what my son had become. But the peace of knowing I had fought back. The peace of knowing I had won. The peace of knowing that I was finally, after 73 years, living entirely for myself. The warrant for Daniel's arrest was executed 3 weeks later. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Detective Chen called me from the station to let me know he was in custody, that the charges were formal now, that the prosecutor was confident they had a solid case. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Relieved," I said, which was true but not complete. I felt relieved and sad and angry and free and lonely and powerful and exhausted and finally at peace. Daniel hired a lawyer, of course, an expensive one who filed motions claiming I was being manipulated, that I was mentally incompetent, that the evidence had been gathered improperly. But there were too many pieces now, too many witnesses, too much documentation. The gravy tested positive for poison. The bank records showed theft. The recording made his intentions clear. And I sat for a competency evaluation with a court-appointed psychiatrist who concluded, in writing, that I was exceptionally lucid, financially astute, and clearly capable of managing my own affairs. I had that last phrase framed and hung it in my hallway. The house is quiet now, quieter than it's been in years, because Lily is back at school, and Daniel is facing trial, and Bethany has filed for divorce and moved back to Connecticut, and nobody calls me asking for money or help or access to my spare bedroom. But it's my quiet, my choice, my life. I changed the locks. New deadbolts, shiny brass, keys that only I have copies of. The locksmith was the same man who changed them when Robert and I first bought this house in 1972, though he's older now, slower, his hands not quite as steady as they used to be. "Good locks," he said when he finished. "Nobody's getting in here without your permission." "That's the idea," I said. "The gravy boat is gone. I threw it away the day after Detective Chen took the evidence sample, wrapped it in newspaper and placed it in the trash bin, and rolled the bin to the curb myself, even though my hands were shaking and my back ached. I didn't want it in my house anymore. Didn't want the reminder that something so ordinary could be turned into a weapon, that something I'd given as a wedding gift could be used to kill me. Robert's chair is mine now, really mine. I sit in it every evening with my tea and my book and the knowledge that nobody is coming to take it, even to use it, to claim it as their own without asking. The legal documents are in a safe deposit box at the bank, along with my mother's pearls that I got back from Bethany's lawyer as part of the divorce settlement. Everything accounted for, everything protected, everything exactly where it should be. I'm 73 years old. I may have another year, or I may have another 20. But however long I have, it's mine now. Not borrowed, not granted by someone else's permission, not contingent on being useful or quiet or grateful or invisible, mine. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself, the one who always says yes, the one who makes herself small, the one who's been convinced that asking for what you need is selfish or difficult or ungrateful, let me tell you what I learned when I switched those plates at Thanksgiving. Your life is yours, not your children's inheritance, not your family's resource, not a vessel for other people's dreams and needs and convenience. Yours. Your boundaries are not cruelty. Your no is not selfishness. Your refusal to be diminished is not ingratitude. Your right to live on your own terms, in your own home, with your own choices, is not something you have to earn. It's something you already have. It's something you've always had. You just have to decide to claim it. And if they call you difficult for claiming it, if they call you unreasonable or confused or manipulated or too old to know your own mind, let them. Let them say whatever they need to say to justify their own behaviour, to explain away your refusal to be what they want you to be. You don't need their approval anymore. You never did. I sit in my living room on a December evening with snow falling past my windows, the first real snow of the season, covering my garden and my driveway and the street beyond in clean white silence. Inside, the house is warm. The radiators tick softly. My tea is hot in my hands. Lily will visit for Christmas. Just Lily. We'll make dinner together, just the two of us, and we'll eat at my table without poison, without manipulation, without anyone making me feel like I should be grateful just for existing in my own house. It won't be the family Thanksgiving I used to imagine when I was younger, when I thought having children meant you'd always have people who loved you, who saw you, who wanted you around for reasons that had nothing to do with what they could take from you. But it will be honest, and it will be mine. And that, I've learned, is worth everything.